Hello there, everybody. Okay, I think you should be able to see me now. Hey, how you doing? All right, we're here tonight, Friday night, with Erekose, and we're just going to talk a lot. We're going to talk about a lot of the things from the state that are duplicitous, In other words, they want to have it both ways depending on the moment. And I think there's a lot of examples. I'm going to start with like 1985 because I think there's a great deal of, examples there. One that stands out to my mind is, hold on a second, folks. There it is. One that sticks out to my mind is the 85 case. The state deliberately used Penny Burnson and her husband in court to basically reenact what she remembered happening to her and stuff. And it's a big emotional show, and it's really meant to just tug at the emotions of the jury, because Penny Burnson's husband is not the perpetrator. And as it happens, neither was Stephen Avery. Right? So I feel like using that tactic alone is, sketchy. Hey there, Pom Pom. Hey, Scott. Hey, Deb. Hey there, Travis, if you're still there. But it's and once again it shows the state willing to use the victim for everything they can get to get their conviction and all that sort of stuff, right? And so they're totally on board and willing to use the victim and all that sort of stuff and claim it's because they're trying to protect the victim, or because they care about the victim, because the victim's wishes are paramount in their, whatever, blah, 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 right? But, okay, so not only do they use Penny Burnson like that in court, right, with her husband and reenacting this horrific thing that happened to her, right, in front of the jury. They played the victim in the emotional response of a horrific crime. Exactly, yes. DSP is exactly right. So, but then we see the normal duplicitous, what we've come to expect from them later on. Because after Stephen gets locked away and all that sort of stuff, Penny Burnson finds herself sitting at home. And then she starts getting these really creepy phone calls from a mouth breather. And then the person started to talk, I guess, a little bit, whatever. But it was totally scaring the hell out of her, creeping her out and scaring the hell out of her. And guess what happened? Peterson comes over, or whoever it was, might have been Kosaric. I think it was at the time Kosaric. And they're basically telling her, oh, don't worry, we got the right guy. You don't have to worry, we got the right guy. Gregory Allen was stalking and harassing her. After the rape and attempted murder, he is now harassing her, and they don't care when she complains about it. I mean, this is right out of the 85 case. Okay? The state, I hate watching the state cower and hide behind the victims of these crimes when it suits them. When it suits them. And only then. Only then. When it suits them, they care about the victim. But trust me, I can tell you there are a lot of victims out there that don't feel like they got any kind of care, much at all. Hochstetler is one that jumps to mind, but there's plenty of others. But, you know, the sheriffs actually lied to Ricky's mom. And I hope to be speaking with Ricky's mom here on my channel real soon. But they straight up lied to her. And she didn't find out until she called the DOJ herself, or she called DCI, I think. She called DCI herself, and that's when she found out that they'd never been contacted at all, and that they actually had pretty sophisticated equipment to use on scenes like this to help, you know, project what happened and you know, and all that sort of stuff. Like, they have pretty sophisticated equipment. So the sheriffs told Ricky's mom they didn't have that. There's nothing DCI could do because they contacted DCI. Well, that wasn't the case. It was a lie, right? This is the way. For me, it's important to point out to people, look at the way they treat victims. Okay? Look at how it's all great and lovey-dovey when everything's fine and status quo. But look, as soon as there's something sketchy on the horizon, they don't care about the victims. That all goes away. It dissipates in a vapor trail. Endangered. Yeah, to allow Penny to be endangered like that. Exactly. It's like, exactly. You know? Here we have a guy who's actually committing actual rapes and stalking women. You know what I mean? We have a real bad guy. But all they can see is Steven. It's bizarre. Hey there, Mark. Systemic corruption built on threats, immunity, and the absence of any ethical or moral compass. Yeah. Yeah, right on, Mark. Hi, Zelma. What's up? How's it going? Hi, Yasmin Kittles. Oh, no, not vapor trails. Yeah, right? Well, that's how quickly it disappears, Trav. What do you want me to say? I'm not going to say ope. For those of you who do not know who Charlie Barons is, I suggest you go find him on YouTube. He's a real funny guy. So like I say, I mean, look, there's an example in the 85 case where they were all too willing to use the victim to their advantage. But then once it started to become obvious that they had convicted the wrong person, they didn't want to have anything to do with it. They just let Penny continue to be endangered by Gregory Allen. I mean, how messed up is that? That's pretty freaking messed up. You know? And I mean, and Gregory Allen went on to commit more, more rapes and whatever. And I mean, he was in jail when this all finally got resolved. He was already in prison because of another crime, another rape or whatever he had done. It's like, there's so many things wrong with wrongful convictions, and it's why it's so wrong for our DAs and our prosecutors to be chasing convictions for their own sake. No, it's about justice. Without justice, the legal system really has almost no meaning. If it's just a good old boy club where you just got to know the right people to know and whatever, and they'll co-sign your BS, but everybody, you know what I mean? It's like, no, it needs to be fair, and it needs to be, blind. Like, Lady Justice has the blindfold, right? It's about, I mean, we didn't come up with things like, vote, everybody getting to vote and just like the idea of justice, right? And all these things. We didn't get to that because, we got to that because we're rational thinking people. Now, sometimes because we're also emotional creatures, it clouds our judgment. And so there's lots of mistakes that get made. And that's essentially what's happening in our justice system. I don't really think there's evil people. It's just the bar has slid. Like the justice bar has like slid and fallen so low that it's like, that's why we have this culture of convictions for their own sake. And that's what's happening, and the problem with all this is, look at what happens. When you have a wrongful conviction, you have a victim's family who walks away thinking they actually received justice, right? Not knowing there is another killer out there, and that person might even come back to stalk and creep on them, right? So there's that tragedy. There's the actual wrongful convicted themselves who get thrown into a 10 by 10 for however many years. If they're able to ever clear themselves, it usually takes roughly 15, somewhere between 12 and 20 years on the average, right? So there's that. There's the wrongly convicted's family, who are now missing their loved one, and all that sort of stuff. And like I said, you still have this perpetrator out there, because when you have a wrongful conviction, you missed the wrong person. You missed the person that actually did it. That's what so many things that are wrong with a wrongful conviction, that it should be more of a concern. But right now in our justice system, it's not. That's how stupid things like AEDPA get passed. Because everybody wants to have like this like no-brainer, don't have to think about it kind of solution. And that's what AEDPA is in my mind. It's like it's a shortcut. And I don't know. I don't like it. I disagree with it. I think there's aspects of it that might be helpful, but the fact that every single American has been robbed by it makes it a piece of just a huge turd for me. But anyways, all right, what's Travis saying? Yes, okay, so Lustita equals Lady Justice, blindfold, sword, and scales. There you go. A lot of times these things happen because law enforcement and prosecution forget that the reason behind the work they do is protecting victims. Yeah, right. I mean, I agree, Zelma. I mean, honestly, I used to, wrestle in high school, and there was a dude on the team who was really a pretty cool dude. Always thought he was a pretty cool dude and everything, but bumped into him at a party after high school one time, and he had just come out of the sheriff's academy, and I was just disappointed because he was nothing like the person I knew or used to know, and it was somewhat disturbing, but I agree that it becomes about the thing that struck me about him was that he seemed all hung up on his own grandeur and his own status, and I don't know, lording this, over people. It was really odd to watch. I mean, it was totally out of character for this guy. Well, at least from who I used to know. And I could see that he had this real ego about it. And I imagine a lot of officers do. I mean, I imagine it's a common problem. So, and to add to that, look, police officers and stuff and law enforcement officers, they get weary too, because trust me, folks, think your stars, you don't know half the crap that they have to actually deal with on a daily basis. All of the stupid squabbles that they have to get into and get involved with because people are getting out of hand and getting rowdy and somebody might get hurt or whatever. I mean, just trust me that consider yourself lucky that you don't have to go and deal with some of this moronic crap. that they have to go deal with. So it can make a person weary. Trust me. Not saying it's an excuse. I'm just saying it gives people a frame of mind to understand how officers of the law can get a little complacent, because there's just a lot of nutty stuff going on out there, and they get to witness it every day, and it colors their opinions. Pros and cons of an adversarial system: a tremendous amount of power in prosecutors. However, we have been on a law and order bent since '69. Well, yeah. Let's see. Like a parking attendant, the high you get from giving idiotic tickets. I think part of what makes law enforcement and district attorneys good that they do believe in themselves. The problem is when they become narcissists and can't see anything other than their opinion. Right. I mean, and I think like I say, I think 95, 98% of, law enforcement officers are actually good dudes. They're actually just trying to do their job in a conscientious way, come home alive every day to their families and their kids, and go to baseball games and soccer games and that sort of stuff. I believe that the lion's share of them are actually good dudes, but then there's always just that group. There's always going to be that group of the what they always say, the rotten apple that spoils the barrel and all that sort of stuff, right? And I think also when it comes to law enforcement, another thing that, again, has its benefits and has its downfalls is the way that they have their little, brotherhood, their little blue brotherhood, or their, brotherhood of the badge, right? And it causes them to close ranks, cover for each other in situations where they've done even heinous things, right? But they'll circle the wagons, and that's one thing that they're real good at, and I think that's good because it helps them do their job in a lot of situations, in a lot of ways. However, I also feel it allows them to be corrupt, and they do sometimes use it that way, and I think that is the sad part of it. In any human endeavor, it comes down to morality in a lot of ways, like Mark Hodnott was saying. It comes down to having a sense of direction, and that certain things are wrong, and those sort of things. And here in Manitowoc, that seems to be lacking, and seems to be lacking in Calumet as well. Now, it could be because these two areas are so rural. I mean, I don't know. I've grown up in the city, so I'm used to, I'm used to, things being pretty, it's a melting pot. There's nothing real shocking, whatever. But questions are the issue here, and the bones prove that it was impossible for her to have been burned in his burn pit. The power went to their heads, and then I did a video about the bones recently, by the way. Anybody that hasn't checked it out, go check it out. It's called The Evidence Against Stephen Avery, The Bones. I've actually made a updated version of it, where I added some footage that I forgot the first time. So I added some footage. It comes from our lovely Julie Pom Pom, who you see there in the live chat. And so I have a new extended version that I'm going to be uploading about an hour before I upload the RAV4, the Evidence Against Stephen Avery, the RAV4 video. So there'll be, for those of you who see it again, this is just to warn you, it is going to be mostly the same as the first one, except it's going to have an added segment that comes from Julie, and then about an hour after that, I'm gonna have the RAV4, the Evidence Against Stephen Avery, the RAV4 video. So be looking forward to that. Why is that funny? You would have to believe the police planted that. And where did the police get the bones from? It's too crazy. I think he did it. Well, I can understand how you feel, Mr. Jamie, but here's the problem. The problem is, I can't believe that's the original burn site. I can't. It's impossible. If it was the original burn site, and it had been sifted as thoroughly as they sifted all of this, there would have been a lot more teeth. There would have been a waist button from the jeans. There would have been a lot of things that aren't there. They're not there. If it's the original burn location, it's not going to have part of, it's not going to have half of what should be there. And by the prosecution's own expert opinion, they only recovered 2/5 of what human cremains would normally be. So I do understand your doubt, and I do understand why you seem, would, be able to reason that Stephen's guilty. But for me, well, everything I'm going to be talking about in this video is a lot of the reasons why I can't believe anything from the state. The state is literally a lie factory, and they will run the victims under the bus if it suits them, and that's what bugs me. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And then we move on into Stephen's current appeal. Well, let's go back to 2005. I mean, we have so much going on there. We have the officer that's calling into dispatch about 30 minutes or an hour after the RAV4 is found, asking if they have Stephen Avery in custody yet. What? It's so many bizarre things that are like, they tip their hat as to what they're doing and what's on their mind. The key and this thing about the cabinet that they're trying to say, like, there's pictures of this cabinet where you can see that it has been rearranged, like gone through. Okay? It was gone through before Colburn got there. He went through it again. And after being gone through twice, somehow at this point, by pushing a folder into the back wall, the back panel of the cabinet, suddenly a key pops out. Like, what? Like, what? And there's all this, it's just, there's all this stuff. It just goes on and on. There's the recent thing with Kratz, right? That we all saw on Twitter, where he was talking with AC Rookie, over on Reddit. And he tells AC that, what does he need a coroner for? Coroner just comes in and kicks the body and says they're dead, right? But then right after that, we hear about Jerry Buting then tweets out, well, yeah, first of all, they never called an anthropologist to the salvage yard or the quarry themselves, and they barred the coroner who was bringing one, and they barred her. But yet they claim an anthropologist, a forensic anthropologist, is what they really needed so badly. It just doesn't wash. It doesn't wash, because if they needed a forensic anthropologist, then they would have let the forensic anthropologist in. Ipso facto. Anyway. So the cops would have to be that colluded to have dirt on each other. No, I don't know. I don't know if you've ever heard my theory, Mr. Jamie, but my theory is that a handful of cops did this. And the rest, remember that Brother of the Badge thing, that Blue Brotherhood thing I was talking about? The rest of them just kind of went along and didn't question. They just, they all thought Stephen Avery was scum too, so they just didn't care. I think when it comes down to it, that's just how easily it gets explained. See, that's good stuff. Case of recordings being referred to here by Dassey are curious, but distilled down to highly speculative fifth-hand information. Okay, well, that's something to be mindful of, folks. Thank you, Mark. I agree with your theory. I have a friend who lives in Oklahoma. She describes something real similar to the Averys. Every petty crime that happens in the county, her family gets targeted. Yeah, I told her she needs to move right now. Yeah, and it happens. We're humans. Even police officers, folks, law enforcement officers, they're fallible, weak humans, just like the rest of us. Right? Only they have the power to try to hide their humanity, or their humanity, I guess. But no, it's like I say, I don't even know how conscious it is when cops do this stuff. But it happens all the time where there'll be a certain family or a certain group or in a certain part of town that they will hassle those people. It could be they catch a lot of those people, doing things or whatever, so they naturally suspect when they hear about some sort of crime or whatever that's similar to one that, you know what I mean? I can imagine how they do that, and like I said, we're all human, so I can understand that happening, but we should still be mindful of it because it's not fair. He waited so long to release until KZ could acknowledge. Yeah, definitely. And like I said, I mean, I've done my video about the cabinet, and there's no way what Colburn was saying is possible. It's complete, utter crap. And then take that. Here's another thing. This key falls out onto the ground. It's on a salvage yard with hundreds and hundreds of vehicles. Probably a fair amount of Toyotas out there. And suddenly they see a key. And they're like, oh, whoa, nobody touched that. They know, like, they even logged it in the evidence report and the ledger as the victim's key. Before, I mean, they called it that before it actually got tested to see if it had any DNA or if they had, before they tried it in the locks. They had to send it for DNA analysis and then, all that, right? So but it says victim's key on the evidence collection. It's just on and on and on, right? Yeah, criminals have impulse issues. I would say that's a fair statement. Yeah, it's absolutely the cabinet, the key, everything about it is just a joke. It's a ridiculous. I mean, look at the machine marks are still on that key. Okay, the little machine marks from the grinder that grinded it are like still on the key. It's like, yeah. There's no Like, I've done videos before where I've shown some of my keys, and you can see a key that gets used, the outer silver layer or whatever gets worn off, and it's like basically brass underneath, right? And so you'll see like a yellow or a goldish color under, on the corner, like where the corners are and stuff like that. But that key was perfect, like it just came out of the grinder. I think she was just referring to everybody about staying on topic. I don't think she was singling out anybody, Daisy. Just for what it's worth. And Scott helped dispose of. Was nearly found by police, and they ran either concocted a plan to silence Avery. Well, that's what I'm saying. I think they found Teresa Halbach's remains somewhere else. Okay? That's just what I think. It could have been that they found him at the Manitowoc County gravel pit. But something tells me that was more likely a staging area. Like a base camp for them to plant, to put things on the Avery salvage yard. And like I said, I don't think it was a big operation. I think it was a handful of interested parties. And I think everybody else just kind of went along with it because they all thought Avery was a scumbag anyway. And it's that easy. Because cops will think that way. To them, when they think somebody's a scumbag, they're a scumbag. It's not. That's it. And it doesn't go well, usually, for them, for the person they consider to be a scumbag. So, and they clearly had it in for Avery. It's shown over and over and over again. For me, the biggest proof of it is what they did to Brendan Dassey. They were so overzealous to get this shaky conviction against Steven that they went out and ruined a 16-year-old kid's life. And that's what they did. Because anybody who calls that a confession, I don't even know what to say. Because it can't be a confession when it's all fed to you. I agree. It is maddening, Pom Pom. Are there any law enforcement officers in the wrecking crew? I think there might be. 3 bone piles in MGP, 2 or 400 yards apart. Suspect human bones in MGP. That's from Travis. I don't think law enforcement, unless I'm wrong. What is the wrecking crew? Wrecking crew is just a group of people who kind of attached to me, and then we started a little community when I started going live back in October of last year. We have a little community on Discord. If you want to join, I'm sure Pom Pom can put up a link for you. You can come over there, and it's just a little place where we go. We talk about the case and talk about evidence and things like that. And so you would smell a body burning, absolutely. So, you have things like that. You have supposedly Steven's actively bleeding, right? He's supposedly actively bleeding in the RAV floor, but yet there's like barely any blood. Seriously. There's a tiny little smear on the CDK. Tiny. There's one drop in a rear door jamb. And then there's some flakes, and there's a squiggle by the transmission. There's literally, for him to have been actively bleeding. So this is like for me, they claim he's actively bleeding, and they talk about how there's so much blood. There's not. There's not so much blood. It's ridiculous that they would even claim it. Okay, there's very tiny amount of blood there. It's just so many things wrong. Stephen had been using the car crusher the day before. Why wouldn't he have just done that? Why wouldn't he just crush it? It just doesn't fit. He's on the verge of a huge payday. Because of all the wrongdoing that existed in the 85 case. And then, in 2005, suddenly this whole thing happens. The thing is that I see where the state and law enforcement and all these people have been dishonest many times. But I see where Stephen has told the truth. He maintained his innocence to his own cost from the 1985 thing. He would have gotten out before 18 years if he would have admitted guilt. They would have given him like parole or whatever. But because he wouldn't admit to doing the crime, they were going to make him do every bit of it. But he could have gotten out. He could have buckled. Okay, but that's the way Stephen Avery is. He's not going to say he did a crime he didn't do. And that's exactly what he proved in 1985. And now we have him saying he didn't do this one. And we're seeing the same BS crap from the agents of the state. How does this happen? That's the real question people need to be asking. In fact, Dean says it himself, and I think in both documentaries, that people need to be asking, obviously to know about Stephen Avery and care about what Stephen Avery, but to also realize that there's other wrongfully convicted out there, that the justice system needs reform, and that it's bigger than Stephen Avery. It is. It's all those things. It's all of them. Good point, Yasmin. Hi, K Cove. Her own family has never said anything like that from interview 1. What's up, T1? BD, how can you not play the last 20 minutes of that confession to the jury? The whole case was based on it. Come on, defense. I agree, T1, but Travis disagrees. And he's probably going to post a comment now to explain why. Or, what do you think about the lack of Stephen Avery and THDNA mingled? Yeah, that's the other part of it. If he's actively bleeding, how is his blood not mixed up with hers in the back cargo area? Why is it only in the front area or whatever? And why does the one by the ignition look like it was put on with a Q-tip and about 4 inches away from the actual ignition? So that couldn't have been done. It's too far away to have been done, while trying to turn, the key. So, anyway. Did the expert on the blood say that the amount of blood on the smear was not enough to ID the DNA of the smear of the blood? Who it was? The smear. Which smear? You talking about the squiggle by the ignition? They tested it. Came back to Stephen. The thing that it got sent out later to the FBI for was EDTA testing. Last 20 minutes are Barb being Barb. She was convinced Stephen did it. Yeah, that's Travis's reason why there, T1. Law enforcement is skilled in breaking someone down. They couldn't break him. Right. Stephen wouldn't be broken. He'll sit and do his time before he'll admit to something he didn't do. It sucks for him, but it's admirable because he could be the catalyst for real significant change in our justice system and get back to caring more about justice and less about overcrowding our prisons. EDTA testing was... Okay, so the reason they were sending it out for EDTA testing is because Jerry and Dean had introduced the argument that the blood vial was used to plant the blood. If the blood vial was used, there would be EDTA in the blood. Even in the blood in the RAV4 there, you know. So they ended up sending the swabs to the FBI, and LeBeau came up with a test and did all these things and made it all up and whatever, and then tested this stuff and said there was no EDTA. The defense's expert came in and said she's not sure that she can agree with that because the actual notes and everything of how they came up with this test, she says they don't have a lot of the documentation, so she doesn't know what the minimum threshold is and all this sort of stuff. So she's saying the results of that FBI test are dubious, kind of at best, but anyway. Zellner's moved on from that theory. She doesn't believe it's the vial, so it really comes down to being the blood on Stephen's sink. So, let's get on to another just duplicitous thing from the state, and the one more that really stands out to me, this really sticks out to me, is the CD. Okay? The CD shows so many things about the CD. Oh my God, so many things about the CD. Okay, let's start with the fact that they had this damn CD in April of 06. Okay? Stephen's trial was in February of 07. Okay? So they had this CD and everything in like April. They held on to that damn thing for 8 months. Instead of handing it, and then they didn't hand the CD over to the defense. They had Fassbender write a report about the CD, whitewashed report about the CD, and sent it over with about 40 other DCI documents, like reports. Then, about 3 weeks before trial, they send over the entire contents of the entire, of the Dassey computer. And even though there's a CD where a computer forensic expert already did an evaluation, they were holding back the results of that evaluation. Okay? And they were doing all of this handing it all over just like barely a month before Denny's due. Denny is where they have to put up the suspects that they are going to refer to during trial. And they have to, the judge has to approve that the suspects meet all of the requirements to be able to be mentioned, right? And so they would have been able to meet they would have been able to get Bobby Dassey to be able to meet Denny had they had the CD. And so that's why there's all this issue. And so you got all this where they're playing games, holding on to things for 8 months, and then handing it over right before the due date. So it's like giving them very little time when they're already scrambling and stuff because it's getting ready for trial and everything. So they're handing all this stuff over in the in the 11th hour, and so it's all very dishonest, right? It's all very dishonest the way that they are acting, the way that they're conducting themselves, right? So Dean and Jerry, weren't able to use the whatever it was in focus, program to be able to look at the Dassey computer and all that, whatever. Now it's come out. Well, we know that was withheld then. Okay. Skip forward to now. Kathleen Zellner becomes Stephen's lawyer. And she is filing a motion for post-conviction relief. 97-406. Motion for post-conviction relief. she has numerous issues in there with new testing she'd done. Things like there were bits of wood and paint embedded in the bullet, not skull or anything else. Lots and lots of things, and she files her motion for post-conviction relief. Obviously, Judge Angela Sukowitz denied it, really quickly, pretty much, but she denied it. And at that point, and the state was arguing the whole time about how Kathleen Zellner and Stephen were procedurally barred. They can't argue that because they're procedurally barred, procedural bar. And then after the motion gets denied, they suddenly then come over and hand over the CD, which they waited until that point because it specifically couldn't be made part of the appeal at that point, or at least that's what they thought. They thought it wouldn't be able to be made part of the appeal at that point because Wisconsin doesn't often remand. The Court of Appeals doesn't very often remand things to the circuit court, which makes it all the more interesting that it's happened twice in this case, because they did remand that CD back to the circuit court. Judge Flowers denied it again. Judge Sukowitz denied it again, and then it became part of the appeal. And now we move on to the bones. Okay? The bones are such an interesting little thing that happened, really, in a lot of ways. You have the bones found over in Manitowoc County gravel pit. I did a video recently where you could see, a lot of the issues around these bones, but basically, Kathleen Zellner is saying if we're finding bones over in the quarry and we're not finding the proper percentage in Stephen Avery's burn pit, and there's things missing from Stephen Avery's burn pit, this suggests that the original burn site was somewhere else. And that's the argument she's trying to make. And she wanted to test those bones in the quarry because there's a new method now where they can test, badly burnt bones and still get a DNA result from it. It happened recently in the California wildfires where they identified a lot of victims of the California wildfires that way. So she wanted to use this to identify those bones in the Manitowoc County gravel pit as Teresa's, and therefore be able to conclude, look, these are not this was not the original burn site. These bones were moved there, and certainly Stephen would not have moved the bones to his own doorstep. And that's the argument. That's the way it goes. So when we get into talking about these bones, there's a lot of things. First off, there's the fact that prior to trial, they believed those bones in the Manitowoc County gravel pit were human. I think they even believed they were Teresa's. But then at trial, their expert, who has been referring to them as human in her reports, suddenly says that she cannot be sure, basically, is what she says. She kind of leaves it open. And then after trial, we have in 2011, the state is using one of Leslie Eisenberg's reports from before trial, where she was talking about all the human bone found in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. And they were using that document, which means they clearly believed that those bones were human, and they clearly believed those bones were Teresa's. The reason why that's interesting is Ken Kratz at trial, because Jerry Buting brought up these bones and brought up these issues. Ken Kratz at trial said he wasn't even going to spend 20 seconds on that because the best that can be said is they're possible human. But clearly everybody believes those bones are Teresa's. But they didn't want the jury to hear that. They figured they obviously felt that the jury would not take kindly to that. And that's why they wanted to hold it back. So, as I said, in 2011, they take one of Leslie Eisenberg's old reports, they go into the evidence lockers, and they start pulling out the bones that Leslie Eisenberg deemed or labeled human, or possible human. And he took all those bones and sent them off to the Whiting Funeral Home to be returned to the Halbachs. Basically to be put in, the ground, or to be, I believe, yes, I've heard she was buried. So they were, the funeral home usually handles all that stuff. We don't go out and dig our, own loved ones' plots. That generally gets done by the, funeral homes and the cemeteries and that sort of stuff, right? So anyway, it goes to Whiting Funeral Home to be returned to the Halbachs. So after saying they couldn't even spend 20 seconds on these bones at trial to the jury, they are now giving these bones back to the victim's family to be, as to be buried. Well, that's kind of an admission. I mean, you're kind of admitting that those bones are Teresa's by doing that. In a lot of ways. Judge Sukowitz doesn't think so. She's trying to classify Assistant Attorney General Tom Fallon, DNA expert prosecutor Norm Gahn, as simple law enforcement officials. Far from it. These guys knew this case better than anyone, except maybe Jerry and Dean. But since I still don't know how much they held back, they probably do know more than Dean and Jerry. So they probably have more knowledge than anybody else, including Judge Sukowitz. Probably more even than Willis. Yeah. So you have that happening. It just shows their duplicitous nature. They're willing to flip-flop and jump back and forth, both sides of the fence, however it suits them, whenever it suits them. Which brings us to the big old capper on this. When Zellner made her arguments of why this is a violation of Stephen Avery's due process rights and why he deserves a new trial, the state had the audacity to respond by saying, we didn't break statute because we only gave them animal bones. And they have now made that public knowledge. That's the official statement, that they gave the victim's family animal bones. You guys get the theme I'm talking about, where they use the victims, they trample the victims. They use them, they trample them. Remember how keen they were to hide behind the Halbachs when Brendan was going through his habeas run? And whenever the reporters were there to ask Schimmel or somebody else a tough question about Brendan, it was like always immediately conjuring up the Halbachs. Oh, well, we wouldn't want to do anything without thinking about the Halbachs and all of the Halbachs and about Halbachs. And basically wrapping themselves in the Halbachs. Right? To fend off the uncomfortable questions. They're all too willing to use the Halbachs, and now that it suits them, they're all too willing to embarrass the Halbachs by publicly saying that they gave them animal bones as their loved one. Pathetic. Seriously pathetic. So the inference can be drawn, as with the blood, such as the bones, which part of the appeal? Why would the Halbachs not sue the state? That's on them. And me and Rule Griffin, you guys may know who he is. I've played he does some little songs every once in a while about making a murder. Recently he did ADA Sukowitz. That was great. Anyway, I was talking with Rule, and he was talking about it, and he was saying it's most likely that they before they actually wrote this brief, that they went over and sat down and had a talk with the Halbachs. and basically said, hey, look, we're going to be saying this, but it's not really true. We're just doing this so that Stephen Avery won't be able to get a new trial and blah, 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 blah. And that they may have been like, you know, that they may have just went along with that. I don't know that that's true. I'm not saying that that is the truth. I want to make that absolutely perfectly clear here. I'm just saying it's a possibility that Rule was talking about. And, I mean, but it does have merit. I mean, I could see the state doing that. And after watching Mike Halbach, you guys saw the video I uploaded the other night. After watching him, like sounding kind of, God, I hate to say this, but sounding kind of goofy. Kind of going, oh, well, yeah, we love law enforcement. Yeah, we love law enforcement. Obviously the other family doesn't. You know what I mean? So, yeah, maybe they might be inclined to just go along. If the state came over and told them that, they might have been inclined to go along. I don't know. But I'm not saying that that's what happened. I'm just saying it's a possibility. That's all. I understand people having a problem with the Halbachs, but here on my channel, you'll never hear me knocking the Halbachs or anything like that. Seriously. I will talk about some interesting facts or some points, like I did in the video the other night with Mike. But I ultimately have a great deal of sympathy for the Halbachs, and I honestly feel bad for them that they are having to deal with this. I mean, you got to imagine when, you know, people in public probably can't help but come up and asking every once in a while, you know, oh, so do you think the state actually gave you animal bones? I mean, they probably get that question every once in a while because people just can't. People just want to come up and ask about it, right? Just because it's so bizarre, you know. So I could imagine they might get approached and that might be uncomfortable, you know. I don't know. I think it's bizarre. When I saw that the state actually made that argument, I was just going, really? Are you serious? I mean, it's like little kids arguing, you know, or I don't know. Anyway. Someone said it best, it's inappropriate, at least on the legal side of things. Well, and that may be true. And honestly, it's true out here too, folks. Trust me. I mean, you don't want to be talking about victims or victims' families in a negative way. Unless you have something more than your hands in your pockets to back it up. You gotta have something more than just your hands in your pockets to back it up. I will always be respectful of the victims and stuff because I am appealing to reasonable people in the world, and so reasonable people respond to reasonable, you know, attitudes. So I feel it's in the best interest of getting more people to listen by being respectful. Yeah, it bothers me to hear Mike Halbach talk about, you know, before they've even found the RAV, to hear him talking about they just want to find out what happened, you know, because, you know, he doesn't know how long the grieving process could take days, weeks, months. I mean, the suggestion of the grieving process that it could possibly take days was a little bit, like, made me, it kind of pushed me back a second. I was like, oh, what? Days? You like I'm sitting there thinking about that. You think you could got over your sister dying this way in days? Or your any loved one dying in days? So I thought that was odd. And Paul definitely thinks it's odd, but it's not proof of anything. And like I said, they are the victim's family. There's a lot of pain and grief that goes along with that, and I certainly am not looking to be, you know, the jerk that wants to attack, the victim's family, and that's not interested in it. And like I said, it's more reasonable to me that they were just felt powerless and just went along with whatever law enforcement said anyway. I mean, that's because that's what everybody else does, seemingly, in that area and in Wisconsin. They all, when it comes to the police hassling them, they just kowtow. It seems to be like the default option for a lot of people. True Truth Monster. And then they didn't even know she was deceased yet. Yeah, it's very odd, Chrissy, that he was saying that. But for me, the thing that really stuck out to me was the fact that he made the suggestion of the grieving process could take days. Like, what? Like, that was the part that really, hit me, Exactly. It's not. The reasonable people of the world would only think I'm a lunatic, or something like that. And and they're right. I would never want to be that jerk, So yeah, you're right, Julie. You're right, Pom Pom. So, I mean, these are the things that the state has done. These are the things that run all throughout both of the cases, the 85 and the Teresa Halbach case. It runs through all of them. The same seams, the same earmarks running through both. And Stephen Avery in both saying, I'm an innocent man. I didn't do this. Truth wins. So, I am going to leave it at that. I'm going to hang out here for a minute. If anybody has a question that you might want to, post or something that you want to talk about, or maybe something real quick. Where'd you get the ball gag from, T1? That's my question. I'm not suggesting anybody was attacking him. It would be livid if the state of Teresa were my sister. Well, I can agree with you on that, Truth Monster. Where did Mark go? I don't know. He might have got busy. I really wasn't trying to seem as though I was attacking anyone. Hey, Hod, are you still out there? Donnie is asleep. It's like 5 in the morning for him right now. Well, as Julie was saying, the clock hasn't started yet, but apparently the record has made its way back to the Court of Appeals, I guess, but they're just waiting for the 40-day clock to start. I would imagine that's going to start within the next day or two. Sorry. That's going to start within the next day or two, and then it will be within 40 days. And she's got a lot to cover here. So she may actually be filing to be able to use more word count. There might be a couple filings in the 40-day period. She might ask for an extension, like I said, because you got the original, you got many of the issues on the original appeal. You have the CD issue and the new Bones issue. So it's a lot. So she may have to up her word count, and she may need an extension, possibly. So we'll have to see how that all goes. But I'm thinking she's going to use the whole 40 days, and if she doesn't get an extension, but I anticipate she's going to ask for an extension, because this is just a lot to cover, a whole lot. The state is running the show, not the Halbachs. That's true. Do you think it will be fairly quick, or will she need all 40 days? I believe she's going to, yeah, I was just explaining, yeah. She's going to need as much time as possible. You got to understand, remember, folks, how big, 1,000 pages, that motion for post-conviction relief, how much was there? I mean, that's a lot. She's got to, whatever she's bringing from that, she's got to put that into this new motion. So it's like, and she has to get the CD and all the arguments for it, and the bones and all the arguments for it. So it's a lot. It's like I said, I doubt she's going to rush. And I anticipate there will be, she will ask for an extension, and I think she'll most likely get it. Yeah, I definitely think she'll take all 40 days, and like I said, if not more. As a practical matter, that whole family could storm the AG's office and demand whatever. They have no say in the matter. However, they could make waves. Yes, that would make things uncomfortable for the state. Certainly, they could do that. Absolutely. Alrighty, folks. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and go get myself some dinner. Thank y'all for being here. I hope to see you guys this weekend at some point. I'll be doing probably something, so hopefully we'll see you guys. What's up there, Falcon? You got here just in time. Yeah, I haven't eaten yet, Trav. I gotta go eat. Alright, folks. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. We'll see ya.